The text message notification chimed at exactly 11:47 p.m., and I knew my marriage was over before I even picked up the phone. Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Wear that red dress I like. M. The message wasn't meant for me, of course. It was meant for my wife Lily, whose phone was charging on her nightstand while she showered. The beauty of modern technology, synced devices sharing everything, including secrets your spouse thinks are buried. I'm Tom Carter, 36 years old, senior executive at TechFlow Solutions, and apparently the kind of husband who gets cheated on during the Christmas season. How festive. I screenshot the message before it could be deleted, adding it to a growing collection I'd been building for the past 3 weeks. Hotel receipts charged to our joint credit card, late-night client dinners that lasted until 2 a.m., the sudden interest in new lingerie that I never got to see. The shower was still running when I heard Lily's phone buzz again. God, I can't stop thinking about last Friday. Your husband has no idea, does he? My jaw clenched. Last Friday, when she told me she was working late on the Morrison account. The same Friday I'd called her office at 9 p.m. and been told she'd left hours earlier. I took another screenshot. The bathroom door opened and Lily emerged in a cloud of vanilla-scented steam, her blonde hair wrapped in a towel. Even after 8 years of marriage, she was stunning, the kind of beautiful that made other men stupid and made me forget, temporarily, that she was slowly destroying our life together. Hey, babe, she said, not looking at me as she reached for her phone. How was your evening? Productive, I said, watching her face as she scrolled through her messages. Not even a flicker of guilt. She'd gotten good at this. Oh, by the way, she said, sitting at her vanity to apply some expensive night cream. I invited Mark to the Christmas party tomorrow. Mark Allen, her ex-boyfriend from college. The same Mark who'd been just a friend for the past year, who'd started working at our company 6 months ago, who'd been the mysterious M behind an increasingly bold series of text messages. Mark Allen? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Isn't he married? Sarah couldn't make it, Lily said, still not meeting my eyes. Something about her sister being in town. I thought it would be nice to include him since he's new to the company. The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly I almost admired the craftsmanship. Sarah Allen wasn't visiting her sister. I checked Mark's Facebook page earlier. Sarah was posting pictures from their home in Brookline just 3 hours ago. How thoughtful of you, I said. A secure husband would trust his wife's judgment about these things, right? She finally looked at me, and for just a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Uncertainty? Fear? It was gone too quickly to tell. Exactly, she said, turning back to the mirror. I'm glad you understand. I smiled, the kind of smile I'd perfected during hostile corporate negotiations. Great. I'll invite Sarah to join us. Let's make it a double date. The night cream tube slipped from Lily's fingers, clattering onto the vanity. What? Mark's wife, Sarah. If Mark's coming alone, the least I can do is invite his wife. I'm sure she'd love a night out. I pulled out my phone, pretending to scroll through contacts. I think I have her number somewhere. We met at that company barbecue last summer. Tom, that's... Lily's voice caught. That's not necessary. I'm sure she's busy with her sister. Oh, I insist. What kind of host would I be if I didn't at least try? I was already typing a message to Sarah Allen, whose number I'd obtained through some creative LinkedIn stalking earlier that week. There, sent. The color had drained from Lily's face, but she recovered quickly. Fine, if that's what you want. It's what any trusting husband would want, I said, climbing into bed. Good night, honey? She mumbled something that might have been good night, but I was already planning tomorrow's festivities. If Lily wanted to play games, I'd show her what happened when she picked the wrong opponent. My phone buzzed, a response from Sarah Allen. Interesting timing for this invitation, Tom. We should talk. I smiled in the darkness. Game on. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, clutching a coffee that had gone cold during my 20-minute drive through Boston traffic. TechFlow Solutions occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower, and my corner office on the 15th floor usually felt like a sanctuary. Today, it felt like a war room. Paula Martinez, my assistant and the unofficial queen of office gossip, knocked on my door at exactly 8:15 a.m. Morning, boss, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk with her own coffee and a conspiratorial gleam in her eye. So word around the water cooler is that Lily's bringing a +1 to tonight's party. Paula had worked for me for 4 years, and in that time, she'd developed an almost supernatural ability to know everything that happened within a 50-mile radius of our building. If information was currency, Paula would be running Goldman Sachs. Mark Allen, I confirmed. You know him? Marketing liaison, started 6 months ago, drives a BMW he can't afford, and has been asking way too many questions about Lily's schedule. Paula leaned forward. Also, his wife called here yesterday looking for him. Seems he told her he was in meetings all afternoon, but Jennifer in accounting saw him leaving with Lily around noon. I made a mental note to send Jennifer a nice Christmas bonus. Interesting, I said. What else do you know about Mark? Well, he's been charging a lot of client dinners to the company card. Problem is, I handle expense reports, and half these clients don't exist in our system. Paula pulled out her phone and scrolled through some notes. The Riverside Inn, Chez Laurent, that new steakhouse on Newberry Street, all charged as business expenses, all on days when Lily was also working late. The pieces were falling into place beautifully. Paula, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to verify these expense reports, hypothetically, I might have copies of everything filed under irregularities to review. And hypothetically, I might have noticed that some of these dinners happened on weekends when our office was closed for client meetings. I loved this woman's attention to detail. Keep digging, I said, hypothetically. After Paula left, I called Greg Morrison, our IT director and one of my few genuine friends at the company. Greg was the kind of guy who could hack Pentagon security protocols before lunch and still have time to help his daughter with her algebra homework. Tom, my man, Greg's voice crackled through the speakerphone. What can I do for you? I need a favor. Tonight's Christmas party. Think you could handle some technical difficulties with the presentation system? What kind of difficulties? The kind where certain photos might accidentally appear on the main screen, maybe some old company retreat pictures that show interesting professional relationships. Greg was quiet for a moment. This wouldn't have anything to do with your wife and that new marketing guy, would it? What makes you say that? Because I handle IT security, which means I see everything that goes through our company servers, including personal emails sent from work accounts. His tone grew serious. Tom, I've got about 50 messages between Lily and Mark that would make a divorce lawyer very happy. Forward them to my personal account, I said. And Greg, tonight's going to be interesting. I'll make sure the technical difficulties are spectacular. At lunch, I drove to a small cafe in Cambridge to meet Sarah Allen. I'd chosen the location carefully, far from our office, quiet enough for private conversation, public enough to seem innocent if anyone saw us. Sarah was already waiting when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with dark hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing, the kind of woman who'd notice when her husband started working late every Friday. Tom Carter, I said, extending my hand as I approached the table. Sarah Allen, she replied, not smiling, though I suspect you already know quite a bit about me. I sat down across from her, studying her face. Your husband thinks you're visiting your sister this week. My sister lives in California. She's been gone for 3 years. Sarah's voice was steady, but I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. Mark's been lying about a lot of things lately. How long have you known? About the affair? 6 weeks. About it being your wife? Since yesterday when you sent that text. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. Mark's overnight bag, packed and sitting by their front door. He left this morning, told me he was going straight to some client presentation and wouldn't be home until late. Funny thing is, I called his office. No client presentation scheduled. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Whatever else happened tonight, Sarah didn't deserve this. Don't be sorry. Be useful. She leaned forward, her eyes hard. What exactly are you planning for tonight's party? I outlined my plan. The photos, the expense reports, the public confrontation. Sarah listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. It's good, she said when I finished, but it's not enough. You're thinking like a businessman. Clean, professional, minimal collateral damage. What would you suggest? Sarah smiled for the first time since I'd sat down, and it was not a pleasant expression. I'm thinking like a wife who's been lied to for months. Mark's been telling me he's working late, traveling for business, networking with important clients. What if those important clients found out they were actually cover stories for hotel rooms and lingerie shopping? You have evidence of that? Honey, I've been married to a cheater for 8 months. I have evidence of everything. She pulled out a manila folder thick with papers. Credit card statements, hotel receipts, restaurant bills, even parking tickets from places he claimed he'd never been. I flipped through the documents. It was a prosecutor's dream, a complete paper trail of Mark's deception. There's more, Sarah continued. Mark's been bragging to his friends about his hot new girlfriend at work. Apparently your wife isn't as discreet as she thinks. Half the marketing department knows about their little arrangement. My jaw tightened. What arrangement? She's been promising to help advance his career, introduce him to important clients, put in good words with management. In exchange for... She gestured vaguely. Hey? Well, you can imagine. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. It was one thing for Lily to cheat. That was personal. But using her position at our company, leveraging professional relationships for her affair, that was something else entirely. Sarah, I said carefully, what exactly do you want to happen tonight? I want my husband humiliated. I want your wife exposed, and I want everyone at that party to know exactly what kind of people they really are. She leaned back in her chair. Think you can handle that level of chaos, Tom? I thought about Lily's face when she dropped that night cream tube, the moment of fear when she realized her careful plans might be unraveling. I think I can manage, I said. We spent the next hour coordinating our attack. Sarah would arrive at the party separately, play the surprised wife who decided to join her husband at the last minute. I would handle the technical aspects, the photos, the expense reports, the public presentation of evidence. Together, we'd orchestrate a confrontation that would leave both Mark and Lily with nowhere to hide. As I drove back to the office, my phone rang. Lily's name appeared on the dashboard display. Hey, I answered, keeping my voice casual. Tom, about tonight? She sounded nervous. Maybe we should skip the party. I'm not feeling well and... Nonsense. You've been looking forward to this for weeks. Besides, Mark's expecting to see you there. Silence on the other end. And Sarah's so excited to join us, I continued. She texted me an hour ago. Apparently her sister's visit got canceled, so she's free after all. Isn't that wonderful? Sarah's coming? Lily's voice was barely a whisper. Of course. I told you I invited her. We're all going to have such a lovely time together. I could practically hear her mind racing, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Tom, maybe? See you at home, honey. Don't forget to wear that red dress. I have a feeling tonight's going to be unforgettable. I hung up before she could respond, smiling as I navigated through downtown traffic. In 6 hours, the TechFlow Solutions Christmas party would begin. By the end of the evening, Lily and Mark would understand what happened when you played games with the wrong people. The snow had started falling, dusting the city in pristine white. How appropriate. By tomorrow morning, nothing would be clean anymore. The grand ballroom at the Fairmont Hotel looked like something out of a Christmas movie. Twinkling lights, elegant decorations, and enough corporate-sponsored alcohol to make even the most awkward office interactions bearable. 200 employees and their guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, the sound of conversation and laughter mixing with jazz standards played by a live quartet. I arrived fashionably late, having spent the afternoon making final preparations with Greg and reviewing strategy with Sarah via encrypted messages. Lily had left the house early, claiming she needed to oversee the setup, though I suspected she was really meeting Mark to coordinate their story. She looked stunning in that red dress, standing near the bar with Jocelyn Webb, her best friend and enabler. Jocelyn was the kind of woman who lived for drama, the type who encouraged bad decisions because they made for better gossip later. If Lily needed someone to validate her affair, Jocelyn would be the perfect choice. Mark stood a few feet away, nursing a whiskey and scanning the crowd nervously. He was handsome in a generic way. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of guy who looked good in LinkedIn profile photos but had no substance underneath. Exactly the type of man who'd think sleeping with his coworker's wife was a smart career move. Tom? Paula appeared at my elbow, resplendent in a green cocktail dress and armed with a glass of wine. You made it. The party's just getting started. Any interesting developments? I asked, accepting a bourbon from a passing waiter. Well, Mark's been checking his phone every 30 seconds, and Lily keeps looking toward the entrance like she's expecting someone. Paula's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Also, I may have mentioned to a few people that there might be some surprising announcements during tonight's presentation. What kind of announcements? Oh, nothing specific, just that management has been reviewing some interesting expense reports lately. She grinned. Amazing how quickly word spreads around here. Across the room, I spotted Greg near the audiovisual setup, pretending to adjust equipment while actually loading a very special slideshow onto the presentation system. Everything was falling into place. At 8:30 p.m., exactly on schedule, Sarah Allen made her entrance. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a stunning black dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her dark hair styled in elegant waves. She looked like a woman who belonged at corporate parties, someone important enough to command attention, the kind of wife any man would be proud to introduce to his colleagues. Mark's face went white when he saw her. I watched from across the room as Sarah approached the bar, her smile bright and predatory. She kissed Mark on the cheek, loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. "Surprise, darling. I decided to join you after all." Mark stammered something incoherent while Lily stood frozen, her wine glass halfway to her lips. The three of them formed an awkward triangle near the bar, the tension so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. Time for my entrance. "Sarah," I called out, weaving through the crowd with practiced ease. "I'm so glad you could make it." I kissed her cheek, playing the gracious host while positioning myself to complete their uncomfortable square. Up close, I could see sweat beading on Mark's forehead despite the air conditioning. "Tom, thank you so much for inviting me," Sarah said, her voice carrying just far enough for nearby eavesdroppers to hear. "Mark's told me so much about his work here, all those late nights, all those important client meetings." Lily's grip on her wine glass tightened. "Mark's been invaluable to our team," I said, clapping him on the shoulder hard enough to make him wince. "Haven't you, Mark?" Yes, of course, just trying to contribute." "Oh, he's definitely been contributing," Sarah said sweetly. "Tell me, Tom, do you know anything about Mark's client dinner at the Riverside Inn last Friday? He said it was crucial for the Morrison account." I pretended to think. "The Morrison account? Greg handles that one personally. I don't think we've had any client dinners scheduled for weeks." The color drained from Mark's face completely. Lily looked like she might be sick. "How strange," Sarah continued, her smile never wavering. "Maybe I misunderstood. Mark's been having so many work dinners lately, I can barely keep track." Before anyone could respond, the lights dimmed, and our CEO, Robert Chen, took the microphone for the annual presentation. Perfect timing. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TechFlow Solutions' annual Christmas celebration." Applause filled the room as the crowd turned toward the main screen. I caught Greg's eye across the room and nodded slightly. "As we look back on another successful year," Robert continued, "I'd like to share some highlights of our team's achievements." The slideshow began with standard corporate fare, revenue charts, client testimonials, team photos from various company events. I positioned myself where I could watch both the screen and our little group's reactions. "Our marketing team has been particularly innovative this year," Robert said, finding creative new ways to build client relationships. That was Greg's cue. The slide changed, and instead of marketing metrics, the screen displayed a photo from last year's company retreat. Nothing scandalous, just employees at a lakeside resort enjoying a barbecue. But there, in the background of the group photo, were Lily and Mark. Standing much closer than colleagues should, his hand resting on her lower back in a gesture that was intimate rather than professional. A few people in the crowd murmured, probably wondering why this particular photo had been chosen, but I noticed several employees pulling out their phones, zooming in on the image. "Interesting picture," Sarah said quietly, loud enough for our group to hear. "You both look very comfortable." The slide changed again, this time to a more recent photo from a client appreciation dinner. Mark and Lily sat next to each other at a round table, leaning in close, sharing what appeared to be a private joke, while other attendees looked on. "I remember that dinner," I said conversationally. "Lily said it was a last-minute invitation. Funny how you both ended up at the same table." Mark was sweating openly now. We were just what?" Sarah asked, her voice still sweet but with an edge that could cut glass. Before Mark could answer, the next slide appeared, and this one was devastating. It was a screenshot of an expense report, blown up large enough for the entire ballroom to read. Mark's name was clearly visible at the top, along with a list of client dinners that included the Riverside Inn, Chez Laurent, and several other romantic restaurants. But the real destroyer was the date pattern. Every single dinner was on a Friday night, and every single one was charged as a business expense for non-existent clients. The murmuring in the crowd grew louder. People were definitely paying attention now. "Oh my," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet section of the ballroom. "Those look like some very expensive client dinners, Mark. I hope they were productive." Robert Chen, oblivious to the drama unfolding, continued his presentation. "Our expense management has been particularly efficient this year, with careful oversight of all corporate spending." The irony was beautiful. Lily grabbed Mark's arm, whispering urgently in his ear. But it was too late for damage control. Paula had positioned herself strategically nearby, and I could see her spreading word through the crowd with the efficiency of a professional gossip network. "Excuse me," Lily said suddenly, her voice tight with panic. I'll be right back." She started toward the exit, but Sarah's voice stopped her cold. "Leaving so soon, Lily? The presentation's just getting interesting." The next slide was a photo that Greg had pulled from Lily's own social media, a picture she'd posted 3 weeks ago of a beautiful dinner spread at Chez Laurent. The caption read, Amazing client dinner, love working with such dedicated colleagues. None are blessed Zundraver's work life. What made it devastating was the timestamp, 9:47 p.m. on a Friday night, when she told me she was stuck in the office handling a crisis. That looks delicious, I said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. I remember that night, Lily. You said you were ordering pizza at the office. The crowd around us had grown, drawn by the obvious tension and the increasingly awkward slideshow. I recognized several department heads, a few senior managers, and enough gossip-hungry employees to ensure this story would spread through the entire company by Monday morning. Mark finally found his voice. This isn't what it looks like. Really? Sarah pulled out her phone and opened her photo gallery. Because I have some very interesting pictures of what it looks like. She held up her phone, showing a photo of Mark's credit card statement. The charges were highlighted in yellow: the Riverside Inn, Chez Laurent, Victoria's Secret, even a charge for a hotel room at the downtown Marriott. Sarah, please, Mark whispered desperately. Not here. Not here. Sarah's voice rose just enough to draw more attention. Where exactly would be appropriate, Mark? At home, where you've been lying to me for months? Or maybe at one of these client dinners that don't actually exist? The slideshow continued behind us, but nobody was watching Robert Chen anymore. The real entertainment was happening right here at the bar. Jocelyn finally tried to intervene, stepping forward with her own wine-fueled confidence. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Sarah cut her off, is thinking that I'm stupid enough to believe this charade. She turned to address the growing crowd around us, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my husband Mark and his client, Lily Carter. They've been having some very productive business meetings lately. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the jazz quartet seemed to sense the tension, their music trailing off uncertainly. Robert Chen, finally realizing that something was happening in the crowd, tried to regain control. Perhaps we should continue with the presentation. But Greg had one more slide prepared. The screen filled with a text message conversation. Mark's phone number clearly visible at the top. The messages explicit enough to leave no doubt about the nature of his relationship with Lily. Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Wear that red dress I like. God, I can't stop thinking about last Friday. Your husband has no idea, does he? The gasps from the crowd were audible. Phones came out everywhere. People taking pictures of the screen, recording videos of Mark and Lily's mortified faces. Well, I said into the stunned silence, raising my bourbon in a mock toast. This is awkward. Maybe we should all trust each other a little less. That's when Lily finally broke. You bastard! Lily's voice cracked like a whip across the silent ballroom. You planned this whole thing! The accusation hung in the air as 200 pairs of eyes turned to watch our personal drama unfold. The jazz quartet had given up entirely, their instruments silent as the musicians leaned forward to get a better view of the show. Planned what? I asked innocently, swirling the bourbon in my glass. A nice Christmas party where we could all get to know each other better? Don't play dumb with me, Tom. The photos, the expense reports, the text messages. You orchestrated all of this. Sarah stepped forward, her voice calm. Actually, Lily, I think you're confused about who orchestrated what. My husband has been lying to me for months about working late, attending client dinners, and traveling for business. You've been helping him lie. We weren't, Lily stammered, looking around desperately for support. The crowd had grown to include most of the party, forming a loose circle around our confrontation like spectators at a gladiator match. Mark finally found his voice. Sarah, let me explain. Explain what? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Explain how you told me you were visiting your mother last weekend when you were actually at the Marriott downtown. Explain how you've been charging romantic dinners to your company credit card. Or maybe explain how you've been bragging to your friends about your hot new girlfriend at work. The crowd murmured at this revelation. I saw Paula near the front, her eyes wide with delight, as she recorded everything on her phone. Jocelyn, still trying to play damage control, stepped between Sarah and Lily. Look, I think everyone's had a little too much to drink. Maybe you should shut up, Sarah snapped, turning her attention to Lily's best friend. Unless you want to explain your role in all this. My role? Jocelyn's voice went up an octave. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah smiled, and it was terrifying. Really? Because I have some very interesting text messages between you and Mark. Want me to share those too? In the crowd, I heard someone whisper, Oh my God, not Jocelyn too. That's right, Sarah continued, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. Apparently, Mark's been very busy building client relationships. Multiple relationships, you might say. Lily spun to face Jocelyn, her eyes blazing. What is she talking about? Lily, I can explain. Jocelyn started. You slept with him? Lily's voice rose to a shriek. You slept with Mark? The crowd pressed closer, sensing that the drama was reaching its peak. Someone in the back called out, This is better than reality TV. It wasn't like that, Jocelyn protested weakly. It was just once, and it was before you two started. Before we started what? Lily demanded. Before we started what, Jocelyn? The trap was perfect. In her anger at her friend's betrayal, Lily was about to confess to the affair in front of the entire company. Before we started seeing each other, Lily shouted. Before Mark and She stopped, realizing what she'd just said, but it was too late. The confession hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Someone in the crowd actually applauded. Mark, desperate to salvage something from the wreckage, tried to take control. Everyone needs to calm down. This is getting out of hand. Out of hand? I stepped forward, my voice carrying the authority I'd developed through years of corporate negotiations. Mark, you've been stealing from the company, lying to your wife, and sleeping with my wife. I'd say things are exactly as in hand as they should be. I wasn't stealing. Those expense reports say otherwise. I gestured toward the screen where Greg had helpfully left the evidence displayed. Charging personal dinners as business expenses is fraud, Mark. The kind of fraud that gets people fired and prosecuted. His face went white. You can't prove? Actually, I can. Paula stepped forward from the crowd, holding up a thick manila folder. I've been reviewing irregular expense reports for weeks. Mark, you've charged over $8,000 in fake business expenses in the past 3 months. The number hit the crowd like a physical blow. $8,000 was real money, the kind of theft that had serious consequences. Robert Chen, our CEO, finally pushed through the crowd to reach us. His face was grim as he took in the scene, the evidence on the screen, the expense reports in Paula's hands, and the obvious guilt written across Mark and Lily's faces. What exactly is going on here? He demanded. Corporate fraud, I said simply. Mark's been using company funds to finance his affair with my wife. Robert's expression darkened. Is this true? Mark opened his mouth, but no words came out. The evidence was overwhelming, displayed on a screen for the entire company to see. Mr. Chen, Sarah said, stepping forward with her own folder of documents. I have credit card statements, hotel receipts, and text messages that prove this affair has been going on for months. My husband has been using your company's money to pay for hotel rooms and expensive dinners while lying to both you and me about his activities. Robert took the folder, flipping through the documents with growing anger. As CEO, he took corporate fraud personally, especially when it was this blatant and stupid. Mark, you're fired, he said without looking up from the papers. Security will escort you out. You'll be hearing from our legal department about restitution. Robert, wait, Mark started. Get out. Robert's voice cut through the ballroom like ice. Now. 2 security guards appeared as if from nowhere, flanking Mark on either side. The crowd parted as they escorted him toward the exit, his face burning with humiliation, but I wasn't finished yet. Lily, I said, turning to my wife, who stood frozen in the center of the circle like a deer in headlights. I believe you have something to say. Tom, please. No, I think everyone deserves to hear this. You've been telling people that I'm controlling, that I don't trust you, that I'm paranoid about your work relationships. My voice carried clearly across the silent ballroom. Want to tell them why I might have been concerned? Lily looked around desperately, seeking an escape route that didn't exist. The crowd waited, phones recording, ready to capture whatever came next. It wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. It just did. What wasn't supposed to happen? I pressed. Say it, Lily. Tell everyone what wasn't supposed to happen. The affair, she shouted, her composure finally cracking completely. The affair with Mark. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps. Even though everyone had figured it out already, hearing her confession was still shocking. What I wanted, I said quietly, my voice somehow carrying over the noise, was a wife who wouldn't lie to me for months. What I wanted was a wife who wouldn't use our joint credit cards to buy lingerie for her boyfriend. What I wanted was a wife who wouldn't gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid when I was actually right. Lily sobbed, her carefully constructed facade crumbling in front of 200 witnesses. But what I got, I continued, was a wife who thought she was smarter than everyone else, who thought she could play games with people's lives and never face consequences. I finished my bourbon and set the glass on a nearby table. Well, Lily, here are your consequences. Robert Chen stepped forward again, his face grim. Mrs. Carter, Given your involvement in this fraud scheme and the inappropriate use of company resources, I'm afraid we'll need to review your employment status as well." "You can't fire me for this," Lily protested weakly. I didn't know about the expense reports." "No," Robert agreed, "but I can fire you for using company credit cards for personal purchases, for conducting an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate, and for creating a hostile work environment, all of which are documented in these reports." Paula stepped forward again, practically glowing with satisfaction. "I have copies of everything, Mr. Chen. Company credit card statements, email records, even security footage of unauthorized after-hours access to the building." Lily's world was collapsing in real time, and everyone was watching it happen. "This isn't over, Tom," she said, her voice shaking with rage and desperation. "You think you've won, but this isn't over." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I think it is." I opened my voice recording app and played back our conversation from the night before, Lily admitting to the affair, begging for my help, blaming Mark for pressuring her into the relationship. "I've been recording our conversations for weeks, Lily. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to make me think I was crazy. My lawyer has copies of everything." The final blow landed like a physical punch. Lily staggered backward, the full scope of her situation finally sinking in. "You recorded me?" she whispered. "I documented evidence of adultery and fraud," I corrected. "There's a difference." The crowd began to disperse, the main event clearly over. People drifted back toward the bar and buffet tables, their conversations buzzing with excitement about what they'd just witnessed. Sarah appeared at my side, her mission accomplished. "Well," she said quietly, "I think that went better than expected." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now Mark comes home to find his belongings on the front lawn and divorce papers on the kitchen table." She smiled grimly. "I filed yesterday." Lily stood alone in the center of the ballroom, abandoned by Mark, betrayed by Jocelyn, fired from her job, and facing divorce proceedings that would leave her with nothing. The red dress that had started this whole evening looked garish under the ballroom lights, like a costume from a play that had ended badly. "Tom?" she called out as I started to walk away. "Tom, please. We can work this out." I turned back one last time, looking at the woman I'd loved for 8 years, the woman who'd systematically destroyed our marriage while making me feel like I was losing my mind. "Lily," I said, my voice carrying just far enough for the remaining crowd to hear, "some people say revenge is best served cold. Guess it's fitting, given the weather." Outside, snow was falling heavily, blanketing the city in pristine white. By tomorrow morning, everyone would know what had happened at the TechFlow Solutions Christmas party. By next week, the story would be legend. I walked out of the Fairmont Hotel into the cold December night, leaving my wife standing alone in a ballroom full of strangers who now knew exactly who she really was. The trust exercise was over. I'd won. But the real revenge was just beginning. The next morning brought 6 inches of fresh snow and a reckoning that cut deeper than the December wind. I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and scrolling through the aftermath of last night's nuclear detonation, while Lily's belongings sat in boxes by the front door. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with messages, calls, and social media notifications. The TechFlow Christmas party had become the most talked-about corporate event in Boston, with videos and photos circulating through every professional network in the city. Paula had texted me a link to a LinkedIn post that was going viral. "When corporate fraud meets personal drama, a Christmas story." Someone had compiled the entire confrontation into a 10-minute video that already had 50,000 views. But the social media circus was just the opening act. The real show was happening in boardrooms, law offices, and divorce courts across the city. My lawyer, David Brennan, called at 7:30 a.m. with an update that made my coffee taste even better. "Tom, I've reviewed all the evidence you provided, the recordings, the expense reports, the text messages, the credit card statements. This is the most airtight adultery case I've seen in 20 years of practice." What does that mean in practical terms? It means Lily gets nothing. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery still matters when it comes to asset division, especially when it's combined with financial misconduct. The joint credit cards she used for the affair, the company resources involved, it all works in your favor. I thought about the house we'd bought together 5 years ago, the savings account we'd built, the life insurance policies and retirement funds. All of it would stay with me while Lily started over with nothing but her designer clothes and a reputation that would follow her across the entire Boston professional scene. "There's more," David continued. "I spoke with TechFlow's legal department this morning. They're pursuing criminal fraud charges against Mark Allen, and they're considering a civil suit against both him and Lily for the misappropriated funds. This could get very expensive for them very quickly. The irony was perfect. Lily had risked everything for an affair with a man who was now facing criminal charges and couldn't even afford his own legal defense. At 9 a.m., Sarah Allen called with her own update. Mark came home last night to find his belongings on the lawn and a locksmith changing the door locks, she said, sounding remarkably cheerful for someone going through a divorce. He's staying at some motel near the highway, and his credit cards are maxed out from all those romantic dinners. How are you holding up? Honestly, I feel fantastic. For months, I thought I was going crazy, wondering why my husband was acting so strange. Now I know I was right about everything, and I have enough evidence to destroy him in divorce court. We talked for a few more minutes about the legal proceedings ahead. Sarah had hired her own attorney, a woman with a reputation for taking cheating husbands to the cleaners. Between the fraud charges, the adultery evidence, and Mark's complete financial irresponsibility, he was looking at losing everything while potentially facing jail time. At 10 a.m., Greg called from the office with the most satisfying update of all. Tom, you should see this place. It's like a morgue. Half the marketing department is walking around in shock. The other half is gossiping about last night like it was the Super Bowl. What about management? Robert Chen called an emergency meeting this morning. Word is, they're doing a complete audit of all expense reports for the past year, and they've suspended 3 other employees pending investigation. Apparently Mark and Lily weren't the only ones playing fast and loose with company money. The scandal was spreading beyond just my personal situation. TechFlow was facing a corporate crisis that would take months to resolve, with potential legal liability and damaged reputation that could affect the entire company. There's something else, Greg continued. Jocelyn Webb didn't show up for work today. Her assistant said she called in sick, but I heard from Paula that she's meeting with a lawyer this afternoon. A lawyer? Apparently, Lily's threatening to sue her for alienation of affection or something equally ridiculous. The whole thing's a mess. I hung up, feeling oddly satisfied. The web of lies and betrayal that Lily and Mark had woven was unraveling in every direction, taking down everyone who'd been complicit in their deception. At noon, I drove to my office to handle the inevitable media attention and corporate damage control. The parking garage was full of news vans, and I recognized reporters from 3 different television stations camped outside the building entrance. Paula met me at the elevator with a grin that could have powered the entire building. Boss, you're famous. Channel 5 wants an interview, The Globe wants a comment, and someone from Inside Edition called asking about movie rights. Movie rights? Apparently, scorned husband exposes cheating wife at company Christmas party is the kind of story that sells tickets. She handed me a stack of messages. Also, you've got about 50 LinkedIn connection requests from people who want to network with you. I spent the morning fielding calls from reporters, declining interviews, and working with TechFlow's legal department to manage the corporate fallout. The company's stock price had actually gone up slightly, with investors apparently viewing the scandal as evidence of strong internal controls and ethical leadership. But the most interesting call came at 2 p.m. from an unexpected source. Mr. Carter, this is Detective Maria Santos with the Boston Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. I'd like to discuss the evidence you've provided regarding fraudulent expense reports at your company. Of course, Detective. How can I help? We're opening a formal investigation into Mr. Allen's activities, and we may need your testimony regarding the timeline of events and the evidence you uncovered. This could result in felony charges. Felony charges. Mark Allen wasn't just losing his job and his marriage. He was potentially facing prison time. I'll cooperate fully with your investigation, I said. Thank you. One more thing, Mr. Carter. We've also received a complaint from your wife alleging harassment and invasion of privacy. She claims you illegally recorded private conversations and orchestrated a public humiliation campaign against her. I'd been expecting this. Lily's last desperate attempt to turn herself into the victim. Detective, I have documentation showing that all recordings were made legally in my own home, with my own devices, during conversations where I was a participant. Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state, but there are exceptions for documenting criminal activity and adultery. My lawyer can provide you with the relevant statutes. We'll need to review everything, but based on the evidence we've seen so far, it appears your actions were within legal bounds. We'll be in touch if we need anything else. After Detective Santos hung up, I sat back in my chair and contemplated the scope of what I'd accomplished. In less than 24 hours, I'd exposed my wife's affair, ended 2 careers, triggered a criminal investigation, and set in motion divorce proceedings that would leave me financially secure while destroying the people who'd betrayed me. But I wasn't finished yet. At 4 p.m., I drove to the house I'd shared with Lily for 5 years. Her car was in the driveway, and I could see her through the living room window, packing boxes with frantic efficiency. I walked in without knocking. It was still my house, after all. Tom? She looked up from a box of books, her eyes red from crying. I was hoping we could talk. About what? About us? About fixing this. She stood up, and I could see she'd chosen her outfit carefully. A simple sweater and jeans, no makeup, trying to look vulnerable and sympathetic. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can... Lily, stop. Tom, please, I love you. I've always loved you. Mark was just... He was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. I looked around the living room at the life we'd built together. The furniture we'd chosen, the photos on the walls, the Christmas tree we decorated just 2 weeks ago when I still believed we had a future together. Do you want to know what the worst part is? I asked. What? It's not the affair. It's not even the lying. I sat down on the couch we'd bought for our first apartment. It's that you made me think I was crazy. For months, you gaslight me into believing I was paranoid and controlling when I was actually right about everything. Tears ran down her face, but I felt nothing. You made me doubt my own sanity, Lily. You made me question every instinct, every suspicion, every moment when I knew something was wrong. That's not love. That's psychological abuse. I never meant... You meant every bit of it. Every lie was calculated. Every manipulation was intentional. You didn't make a mistake, Lily. You made a series of choices, and now you get to live with the consequences. I stood up and walked toward the door. Tom, wait. What about our marriage? What about everything we built together? I turned back one last time to look at the woman who'd shared my bed, my home, and my life for 8 years. You destroyed our marriage the first time you lied to me about working late. You destroyed everything we built the first time you charged Mark's dinner to our credit card. I didn't end this, Lily. I just made sure everyone else knew what you'd already done. I walked out of the house and drove away, leaving her alone with her boxes and her regrets. That evening, I sat in my downtown apartment, a temporary rental while the divorce proceedings played out, and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white that would be dirty and gray by morning. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Allen. Mark's been arrested, felony fraud charges, thought you'd want to know. I raised my wine glass in a silent toast to justice served and trust betrayed. Tomorrow, the lawyers would begin the formal process of dismantling my marriage. Next week, the criminal trial would begin. Next month, Mark and Lily would discover what it really meant to face consequences for their actions. But tonight, I was content to sit in my new apartment, watching the snow fall on a city that would remember the TechFlow Christmas party for years to come. Some people say revenge is best served cold. As I watched the winter storm blanket Boston in pristine white, I couldn't help but smile at the perfect timing. Merry Christmas, Lily. Hope you like the gift.